RISHABH. Welcome to this weekend edition of the program. It is Global Insight on For You Media Africa. Today, we want to revisit, of course, some of the decisions arrived at the last foreign ministers meeting, that is BRICS plus foreign ministers meeting in Russia, and we are looking at some of the endorsement made by these ministers, capitalizing on de-dollarization, which was among the major endorsement, and how feasible is this going to happen now with the BRICS bloc. De-dollarization was among major endorsements made by foreign ministers of BRICS Plus in Novgorod in Russia. Among other significant topics, the meeting that held from June 10, 11, 2024 discussed a plethora of issues underlining the importance of strengthening multilateralism for a just global development and security, reflecting the unity and cooperation of BRICS Plus nations in addressing global challenges, especially in their quest to be major actors in creating a new world order and also an economic order. The ministers, including Sami Shukri of Egypt, who joined, of course, the session for the first time, exchanged views on major global and regional trends, including the bloc's commitments to enhancing global governance and promoting a more inclusive and representative international system. Thus, today's insightful program, Global Insight, is focused on exploring the implication of de-dollarization, the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Also to know if the BRICS has the probability or the capacity to change the economic patterns and ensure a more robust, agile and accountable multilateral system. And this is Global Insight. Stay tuned. How did the dollar become the global reserve currency? And of course, today we see the BRICS Plus group moving forward to actually work towards changing the narratives pertaining the economic system, the financial system in the global world, in the quest to creating a new world order. How feasible is this quest by the BRICS Plus? It should be noted that during a recent meeting, foreign ministers of BRICS Plus underlined and reiterated the need to do business or to trade using local currencies, and in so doing, they are going to actually bring down the value of dollar. And how feasible is this? Today, during this insightful and discursive program, we're going to understand the stakes surrounding this very important topic, and the feasibility, the challenges and opportunities presented to the BRICS Plus leaders in their quest as major actors in creating the world order and even an economic order. Time to uncover the panel, and of course I'll be taking you straight away out to Russia, where we're being joined by YULIA BERG, a political scientist, founder, GLOBus expert club. Hello to you, Yulia, and thanks for joining us this day.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here today to discuss this very important topic.
Unfortunately, I can't get through to Yulia. We'll stay in Russia with RISHABH SETHI, international relations expert and also civil diplomat. Welcome to this edition of Global Insight, SETHI.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clarice, for the invitation, and I'm looking forward for our today's panel for our joint discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you for respecting the rendezvous. To Jamaica, we'll be joined by ELLIS CLIFTON, geopolitical analyst and electrical power engineer. Hi, Clifton, and thanks for joining us again this day.
Yes, good afternoon, Clarice. Good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I'm very excited to join you in this very interesting conversation today.
Indeed, we look forward to having an interesting conversation. And now we acknowledge the presence of Alexander CHOPOV, who is a political scientist and, of course, joining this platform for the first time. Hello to you, Alexander, and welcome.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me, and look forward to having an interesting and very deep, hopefully, discussion.
Indeed, it is very imperative. If everything is okay with Yulia, we're going to kick off the conversation with you, looking at the discussions arrived at or endorsement by the foreign ministers of the BRICS plus group, and holistically some of the aspects, and particularly on the de-dollarization. What is your perspective on this?
Well, this year is full of BRICS events, and under Russia's presidency, and given the geopolitical context, each meeting of officials and each event dedicated to business activities and activities of the NGOs are probably tripled, if not more, in terms of their impact on the development of BRICS itself, because each of the events, each of the meetings, each of the activities by the contact groups, they are aimed to discuss and prepare joint approaches to the topical issues of today. So the meeting of the foreign ministers, I assume, was also aimed to coordinate some of the activities at the geopolitical arena. And here, when we talk about the possibilities of building the new type of interactions at the international arena, of course, we can never avoid economic issues, because we can be making any kinds of beautiful declarations, but if we don't have the foundations laid by the economies, by the new possibilities of trade, which definitely implies financial system, they would only remain declarations, right? So I would also suggest to look at the meeting that took place, the meeting of the ministers of foreign affairs, given the context. And we can already say at the moment that probably this meeting was also aimed to coordinate activities in terms of the peace settlement of the current conflict in the Eastern Europe, as we could see that there was a follow-up speech that could probably be compared to the Munich speech by Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. And we could see that today the alternative peace conference was launched in Switzerland. So I would suggest to look at those events as connected ones, because that's what it is. And of course, no kinds of security talks and no kinds of talks about the beautiful new multipolar world could be possible unless there is a plan, or unless there is a certain scheme already elaborated that would allow to facilitate trade, avoiding the petrodollar, which is at the moment basically controlling all of the processes, all of the currency exchange processes, and all of the trade, basically.
And of course, and those are some of the major stakes to consider as we continue to move in a world of multipolarity. Let me continue with the conversation with you, dear ELLIS. We are looking at de-dollarization today, but it is also imperative to understand how the dollar became that very strong or dominant international reserve currency.
Yes, thank you, Clarice. The topic and the history of the emergence of the dollar becoming the preeminent currency for international trade started all the way back in 1913, where the Federal Reserve Act was passed, which is quite unconstitutional, because the Federal Reserve itself is not a government arm of the American government, but it's a private bank. And they were authorized and licensed in order to create the currency. And going through the First World War, in which at the time The British pound was the dominant currency for international trade. The Commonwealth was still quite dominant because you had the British government controlling approximately 1/3 of the countries around the world. So for international trade or trading among, or the triangular trade that emerged, you had the British pound being dominant, also the gilt, and also the French franc. But then there was World War I, then World War II. Emerging out of World War II, you had the Bretton Woods, and the Bretton Woods was an agreement out of a basket of currency, and that basket of currency would involve mostly the states that emerged victorious in World War II, the Western states, so the US, France, Germany, the Deutsche Mark, the Dutch Guild, so forth and so on, and also the yen was also involved and included in that as well. But then as time went on and international trade continued, the US, the dollar started to be dominant, and it was in the 1960s when it was the French president, Charles de Gaulle, started to understand there were some discrepancies concerning the amount of notes that were being produced, and wanted to understand whether or not these notes were backed by gold. And so when Charles de Gaulle raised the question, the powers that be that control the financial system inside of the US, inside of Britain, had to re-strategize. And so the petrodollar was created, where the Americans went to Saudi Arabia, negotiated that energy, which was their strategy, would be sold exclusively, or oil, in the petrodollar. And so this came into effect and was signed on the 9th of June, 1974. So it has been 50 years, just over 50 years, and it is now expired. That deal has been expired. Back in 2021, the Russians and the Saudis essentially came to a military agreement. Now, that military agreement was quite surprising, because now it's given the Russian the obligation under that contract to be a protectorate, or just for Saudi to be a protectorate of Russia. And so now we have a natural transition taking place in the emergence of the Brics, and the understanding that the dollar has been used as a weapon to undertake hybrid economic warfare on other states by kicking them off the SWIFT, or confiscation, or not allowing them to settle their debts or to settle trade. So now is a natural end of the petrodollar. And so now we have the emergence of the Brics, and of course we will go into that later on. But absolutely, the petrodollar was never supposed to, was never a legitimate currency. It was accepted by most of the world because most of the world did not have the ability to say no. And those countries that had the audacity to resist, i.e. Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Mohammed and Gaddafi in Libya, they received the wrath of the establishment, the elite that is behind this petrodollar, Ponzi scheme. Let's call it that, because that's what it is, really. So yes, that's the history in short.
Indeed, bringing us to the complex nature of the dollar, and of course, like you highlighted, Ellis, the world is changing, and the time has changed, given that it was largely after the First and Second World War that the changes occurred at the economic level. And today we see blocs, especially the Brics plus blocs, trying to change the economic part, and also to see how the international financial architecture can be changed to be ensure a balance of economic power. We continue with you, RISHABH. Now, today we are looking at the endorsements made by the Brics foreign ministers in Novgorod, Russia. So we are looking at the aspect of de-dollarization. So is the dollar dominance the reason for the imbalance of economic balance of power in contemporary society? If yes, what parameters can be used to restructure the economic system?
Thank you very much, Ms. Clarice, for your question. You know, when we are talking about de-dollarization, or we are talking about promoting the multipolar world globally right now, BRICS Plus as a group of officially 10 countries are playing a very much important role right now. Because if you can see the history of the US and their currency, US dollar, they always try to maintain a strong monopoly or hegemony all over the world globally in terms of international trade, in terms of different imbalances in the economic system, in terms of oil and gas reserves also, because the US dollar is directly or indirectly is connected globally with so many things, even the gold exchange rate, prices, international logistics and everything. So now BRICS Plus as a platform of officially 10 countries is playing a major role in promoting to de-dollarize, because after the 2 years ago when the special operation started between Russia and Ukraine, it was a big showcase to the whole world as an example. It set an example that countries, developing countries or underdeveloped countries have understand themselves that at any moment in the future, the West or the US can make sanctions or can kick them out their country currency from the SWIFT payment system also. And now, as you see that currently right now, actively so many events are taking place of BRICS in Russia, and how now the BRICS group has already came up with a solution that we should come up with our own digital payment system also with a common BRICS currency, which is one of the biggest alternatives to counter the dominance of the US dollar. And now it is very much important. And also this is an example for the other countries also, that they should try to promote their own local currencies, because this is the golden chance and the golden moment that you should take this chance and try to promote your own local currency reserves also, and try to utilize those currency reserves in making the global trade between your country. Because as you saw 2 days ago also, Russia has taken a very strong step for stopping the trade in euros and dollars in the stock exchange also. And now already the BRICS countries, especially I can say about Russia, India and China, they are already doing their trade in their local currencies. And now we are waiting soon as when the BRICS common currency will start to trade between the countries. And also we can use this local currency or common currency of BRICS not only between these 10 countries, it can be also can be utilized for the international trade between the other friendly countries, maybe from the Africa or the Latin America also. And also one more important point is that the BRICS countries should together now need to formulate their own payment system, because we cannot be dependent on the SWIFT system or the Visa or MasterCards like that. And as Russia has already their own system like Mir cards, which they have already started and working very much amazingly. And India has already their own payment system like UPI payment system and the RuPay card system. And same wise like China. So these such examples should need to be adopted in the future for the other countries also, to prevent themselves and to stop the hegemony and to help to de-dollarize the power of the US dollars.
Absolutely, very imperative. We are in changing times, and of course, with different countries trying to survive economically, and we also see emerging economies. But then it seems that the fact that the dollar is still very strong and internationally recognized as the reserve currency, it's bringing a lot of controversy. And we come to you now, Alex. How does this commitment to de-dollarization by the BRICS nation impact the present global economic landscape that a bloc like BRICS is advocating for in a world of multipolarity?
Me, right?
Sure, Alex.
See, the thing is, when we talk about de-dollarization and we talk about, the BRICS countries trying to de-dollarize, I would actually say that if it wasn't for the hegemon being acting in so many stupid ways, that the dollar would still be very much a reserve currency. But you see what is going on with the issues of Russia and Ukraine, right? With 300 billion Russian assets of $300 billion of Russian assets being confiscated, and you have the rest of the world look at this and say, wait, why would we, use this as a reserve currency if at any point our money can just be stolen from us, basically? And this goes back to probably, the 90s, right? The hubris that started in Washington. I went to college in Washington, D.C. I worked in the U.S. Congress for about a year. And at that point, back in the 90s, you have books like quotes like the end of history, right? Like, we won, we beat the Russians, we got the Chinese down. And this whole concept, a generation of politicians grew up on this hubris that America can just do whatever they want. Like we go, there's a saying, right, that war is God's way to teach Americans geography. And for several decades, that was the case. There was Pax Americana. Americans could do whatever they want. And it seemed that the dollar was unshakable, like you could not do anything about it. But because of that hubris, because of that lack of, political thought, further away than the next election cycle, you have now a generation of politicians in the West who completely fail to see where they're heading, where they're taking their economies, where they're taking their countries. And if you compare again what happened in the foreign ministers meeting with BRICS and the G7 that is going on right now, right? There was an article, I think, by Politico that called the G7 Six Lame Ducks and Maloney. All the politicians there are unpopular. They're about to lose their jobs. They're about to get kicked out. And at the same time, you got, the BRICS, who, besides calling for de-dollarization in the communique that they published after the meeting of foreign ministers, called for the reform of the UN Security Council, called for, a more fair, better world where you don't have a hegemon that just, bullies people all over the place, bullies other countries, and again, steals their money. So a great chunk of de-dollarization effort was actually made not by the rest of the world, but by the lack of political foresight by, people in Washington, D.C. and in Brussels.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, of course, for that, which will lead us to the next question directed to Mateusz Piskuk. He's a Polish journalist and also political scientist. Is joining us briefly to share his holistic perspective on the aspect of de-dollarization in the multipolar world advocated for by the BRICS Plus group. Hello to you, Mateusz. So the question directing to you is what specific steps actually outlined by the ministers to promote this de-dollarization, and what impact will this have on economic policy decision making in the respective countries of the BRICS, given that they are still actually striving with their own local currencies?
Well, thank you for your invitation for today's debate. I would like to stress that things have accelerated because of the conflict in Ukraine and because of the sanctions, mainly, of course. Mm-hmm. We know that there are several new ideas for sanctioning Russia and the financial markets and also the banking systems of all countries who cooperate, still maintain their cooperation with their Russian counterparts. So the things which would be hard to imagine just a few years ago, the things which are undermining, creating an alternative for the dollar system of the world and for the hegemony of the United States as well in the international trade, are coming to a point where all the countries, of course, first and foremost, BRICS countries, will have to institutionalize some elements and work out a common policy and common institutions as well. Well, we have already noticed in our discussion the fact that BRICS has to create, sooner or later, will have to create its own system, which could be an alternative for the SWIFT system controlled by the Americans. Yes, that's the first point. But secondly, BRICS will need to eventually think about issues like creating a common currency, common trade currency, which could replace the dollar, because unfortunately, sooner or later, we will have also some internal disputes between the BRICS member countries about the currency which could be used in the trade between BRICS member states. I mean, of course, now we have a growing role of the Chinese currency of yuan in the contracts and in agreements between BRICS member countries as well as other non-Western countries. But sooner or later, several other countries will come to a conclusion that there should be a common alternative in the form of common currency. I'm not talking about the currency like, you know, euro in European Union, but I'm talking about a currency which could be used only for international transactions between BRICS countries, for instance. And what I would like to add, if you don't mind, is that, well, the topic as such is, well, of a very huge importance for the future of the world, for the future of the hegemony of the United States and of the so-called Western world, because we all perfectly know that the whole system of dominance is based on the dollar. On the dollar as an artificial currency, as an artificial means of soft power used by Washington and the Anglo-Saxons. So what I'd like to stress from a European perspective, just a few words more before I finish this short opinion. What we should remember is that several wars had been waged in defense of dollar and the system of the dollar. Just remember the fate of Iraq. I mean, in 2003 and afterwards, what happened there. I just like to remind you that the Iraqi authorities at that time had some negotiations with several European politicians like Jacques Chirac, the French president, who was eager to talk about the replacement of dollar by euro, by the European currency. So actually, what I want to say is that a dollar is a threat not only for the BRICS countries, it is a threat, the hegemony of dollar is a threat for euro currency as well, for the European currency, which is now at the moment being dependent on the US dollar. But nevertheless, if Europeans have any ambitions of creating an alternative international currency, they should also think about weakening the dollar system, and they should be quite sympathetic to the endeavors of BRICS countries.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Matthias, and for your input on our topic for discussion this day, which is very imperative. It is often said that when a nation doesn't have a strong economic progress, then it will be relegated. We want to get the African perspective of the aspect of de-dollarization, noting that the foreign minister of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, was part of the BRICS summit, and we saw Egypt's foreign minister Sami Shukri joining for the first time, as Egypt is one of the nations that joined BRICS recently. So we want to look at the African perspective in the aspect of the de-dollarization to counter the U.S. hegemony. And coming to you, Meki El-Moghrabi, who is a journalist and writer, also ex-diplomat. We want to look at, Africa today still faces a problem of no common currency that can boost the continent's economic progress. And now we see the BRICS nations are pushing forward for the de-dollarization process. How will this affect the African continent, and maybe positively or negatively?
Thank you. This is Meki El-Moghrabi. I'm from Sudan, and I'm currently in Egypt. You are lucky because you have an African refugee that went out from his country because of the war, and that is an example of what the U.S. policy is doing in Africa. This war already was happened in Sudan because of what we call it the quartet mechanism, and USA and UK was part of that mechanism. And I'm sorry that I can't appear by camera because I live in a very small apartment as a refugee. I just want to bring you into reality. I had the office in my home and all things in Sudan, but that is all left. And now I live in a very small apartment, living a rich country, agricultural country, oil producing country behind me because of the war that planned by the West. Let me jump to the answer or to my contribution. First of all, I want to thank this platform that we can contribute from Africa about the issue of the de-dollarization. Thank you, WIYDORVEN. And my background is media and diplomacy, but I spent time in AFCFTA in Africa, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area. And also I work as a media coordinator for PASI, which is the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So that I am well connected with African problems, and I served in 23 African countries, not just a visit. I served there, and I went into the reality. And I had a theory, I call it the morning economy, which is a color of economy that matches with Africa. Okay, my suggestion for de-dollarization, number one, to start with digitalization and generating digital dollar without the permission of United States. You can ask me why we do that, and we still we need the dollar, and how we can do the de-dollarization with a kind of de-dollarization. I just want to say the dollarization started in 1971 by Richard Nixon, and this is what's called Nixon shock, when he waived the gold as a cover and a stock for the dollar and imposed the dollar on the wallet. And so that he lifted the currency that we agreed on, which is the gold, and then he imposed the dollar. So when they shifted, and when they took the currency that we agreed on, or we agreed upon, he didn't take the permission of the wallet. So that we choose the way that matching with us. We start with generating a digital dollar, nothing to do with the real US dollar, as a point of exchange. It is not a banknote, It is just digital point. And after that, we can change the name, we can do anything. Or you can make the $2 1 point. Anyway, it will be a digitalization for the dollar, and that issued by banks, by exchange, by reward, by anything. Number two, enhancing, this is what I wrote in my paper, but now I'm not handling Africa issue. It is more than BRICS and South to South issue.
Yeah.
But what I have written before, enhancing intra-Africa trade. And now we can say South to South trade. And my point here, if we implement in Africa, AfCFTA, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area, or if we strengthen the regional economic blocks, that will give us a platform of exchange, of real exchange of what I talked about, which is the digital currency. Number three, and this is the last point, we should be more flexible in the monetary policies between BRICS country and de-dollarization bloc. So I can use my currency in other countries, and other countries, they can use their currency in mine, and we can use the digital point or the digital dollar. And after that, we create a new ways of exchange that will make the de-dollarization real process.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you so much, Mekia from Sudan, for contributing to the topic this year. We coming back to you this time around, ELLIS Clifton. We've heard the holistic approach of each and every expert pertaining a topic for discussion this day, and I would like us to continue to bring more clarification as to why it is necessary to ensure that the de-dollarization is a success as far as readjusting the economic or international economic landscape is concerned, and also enhancing international trade and finance.
Thanks, Clarice. The currency represents the lifeblood of the country economically. So the currency, in theory, should be a measurement of the value of the resources and the value of the work that is undertaken in order to produce, and there should be a reflection of the value within the currency that you trade for a particular commodity. So it is at the most important point. There must be a central fulcrum or foundation in order to measure value, and that starts with the currency. So the dollar, it was unconstitutional because, you know, it was always supposed to be gold and silver. No entity should have had that power to create dollar, because JP Morgan, there's a famous quote, says that gold is money, everything else is credit. And generally speaking, if we look back in history and analyze, for example, the Roman Empire, all hegemonies collapse under the weight of inflation. The denarius at the time, you know, they started to create new denarius with less and less gold, you know, put more copper in there and put more other elements in there, unto the point where there was a 15,000% inflation. So the phenomena of currency manipulation, and the phenomena of not just currency manipulation, but the life expectancy of any fiat currency, there is a life expectancy where the value diminishes over time. And where you allow a centralized hegemony to create a currency that has no backing with traditionally what money is supposed to be, i.e. gold and silver, which have several characteristics which you cannot forge it, you cannot manipulate it in a laboratory or something like this, much more creating digits in a computer and new digits in a computer and then calling it money. This is against the fundamental reality of what a money should be, which is a store of value that cannot be manipulated. And so it is the foundation of all things to make sure that there is a currency and a system that cannot be manipulated by any individual member. Now, this is tricky because we're living in the technological age. Absolutely. And in the technological age, we're moving towards digital currencies. And so the idea is, what if the individual, the administrator, is able to change the digits inside of the centralized computer system that manages these digits? So, how do we tie these digits to gold or tie them to commodity to ensure that there is no manipulation that is taking place, which we've always seen throughout history? So these are some of the technical challenges that must be overcome. And we also must prevent there being another hegemony. And that is why gold, is apolitical. You cannot control gold. You can control the dollar. You can control any currency that is created by a central bank in any sovereign state or so-called sovereign state. But gold cannot be banned. There is no third-party risk that is involved in gold. That is why we must ensure that gold is the basis, the fulcrum, the foundation of the new economic, and monetary system. And this is something that we now need to see Brics issue white papers and methodologies that will answer the risks that exist in the recreation of a hegemony and the repeat of the same sort of mistakes that we can say that have been made historically. So these are some of the challenges that must, on just the last point, my brother said the currency, you mentioned about generate digital currency without permission of the dollar. This also will lead to another economic collapse, inflation. We must have gold. Gold tied to a digital note, that there is some way of auditing, some regulations in each country that we can go and check each other party that professes that they have the gold to back the digital currency that they produce. This must be done with checks and balances.
Indeed. Of course, we need to be very meticulous and intentional about how this can be implemented practically to mitigate some of the negative effects that may arise in the nearest future. Back to you, dear Yulia, looking at what was advocated by Alex earlier on during his intervention, noting that the fact that the dollar has been the international reserve currency is actually detrimental, of course, to nations, citing the recent sanctions and the use of the Russian reserves in the United States to assist the Kyiv government in the crisis pertaining Russia and Ukraine. Being conversant with all of these complexities, do you think the scope is broad enough for the BRICS alliance to counteract all of these by setting up new financial structures that will be strong enough to redefine the existing financial systems across the world, which are actually dominated by the US dollars?
Well, the current system that is based on the US dollar, it's pretty much all over the place. So you cannot find a place in the world, or maybe you can, but those would be quite autonomous communities, not much connected to other ones, that is not somehow directly or indirectly using the US dollar. So, of course, you cannot just take and replace such a system in one day and probably it would be taking quite a lot of time. And if we're talking about a system that is to be based on very differing foundations, just like Mr. Ellis was just saying, that that would probably require a deep re-evaluation of actual assets, of actual resources, the value of those, so that the new system would be based on the currencies would be based on the actual value that is produced by a country. So you cannot do it in a fast way, and it is not possible to replace such a system that is deeply integrated into all of the processes in just a couple of days. So we could see quite a lot of examples in history when certain kinds of shock therapy were applied, and mostly in order to transform the economy or the existing status quo in terms of balance of power and balance of economic power. Mostly you had major military conflicts, just like the World War II, just like the World War I happening, as a result of which you could see quite a rapid change of the balance of power. So there are basically two options, some fast-forwarded or accelerated scenario that mostly implies either revolutionary or military activities, and that is definitely related to quite a lot of destruction, shock, quite a lot of negative consequences like an economic crisis, or else that could be an evolution, or let's say alternative implementation, simultaneous implementation of a new system. Yet at the same time, we need to understand that even though the technical capacities at the moment do allow to, let's say, fast forward this kind of processes, anyway, it's not going to be fast and easy. And another important thing to consider, and we have already seen it, and some of the examples were already mentioned in this program, that once there is a threat, even a theoretical threat to the existing system, the existing system starts fighting back, and this could lead to various kinds of escalations. We see that once Gaddafi has, put his head up and he started to speak up and everything, it didn't take long for him to be taken down. And there are quite a lot of examples of the kind when alternative points of view or the people expressing alternative points of view were just simply taken out of the arena in a fast and violent way. So here, even though the BRICS countries represent a strong union of nations, and we have China in BRICS, which is the key producer of pretty much everything or almost everything. We have India with a very active population and quite a lot of achievements in terms of IT, in terms of agriculture, in terms of many other things. We have Russia that is standing strong for its sovereignty and for its right to implement its own policy and its own vision. Then there is South Africa. Then you have Iran, and I mean the new countries that have joined, including Saudi Arabia, are very strong players either at the regional arena or at the international arena. But the key question here would be, what is the critical mass necessary to implement this new system, and how exactly it would be unfolding? Yet at the same time, it is clear that the technical solutions themselves have been worked on for the last probably decade, maybe a bit less, but definitely for at least 6 or 7 years, those were worked on and thought through. So there are several of those that information on which could be found on, simply on the internet and open sources. So it's clear that the best minds of the BRICS countries have already not just given it a thought, but have already tested some of those solutions. Yeah. But we will see how that unfolds as, the existing system would be ready to fight back as much as it can in order to maintain control. Yet we see that the existing economic model is not really based on the real value, let's say. And we see that like every empire in history has its own life cycle. This one is already probably coming to its end, as there are quite a lot of signs that indicate that.
Okay, and that is where the problematic lies. How do we react to the drastic changes occurring at every level, especially at the as far as international relations, cooperation, and even economic cooperation is concerned? Right now, to you, Alex, while looking at all the the stakes and controversies of the plight of de-dollarization, we begin to want to understand again now this other aspect. It is often said that the dollar was actually chosen or seen as the international reserve currency due to its safety and security, and of course the depth of the U.S. market. Do you think this actually applies in the present economic context, and now with this aspect of security and safety being a major strong point, what roles or what ways can the BRICS alliance, BRICS Plus alliance, actually work towards ensuring a currency that will be more sustainable, safe, and secure in the aspect of doing business?
Well, obviously, the dollar was a decent choice because you have a country that prints it, protected by two oceans. There's no natural enemies on their continent, so it seemed to be a safe harbor. And like I was saying before, if it wasn't for the hubris that absolutely dominated the American political thought since the end of the Cold War, the dollar might have been, de-dollarization would not be needed. As Yulia mentioned, the system fights back, but the system is fighting back atrociously. If you look at, the last, 25 years, right? There was an article about the peace proposals between Russia and Ukraine back in 2022, right, in April. And one of the quotes there is, Putin is a habitual liar. And if you actually look at what Russia's been saying for the last 25 years, right, Gaddafi was mentioned, Saddam Hussein was mentioned, Jacques Chirac was mentioned. Back in 2003, when the Second Iraq War was being planned and America was getting ready for the Second Iraq War, Russia was saying, guys, just don't do that. That's not going to end well. You're going to destroy the region. You're going to, waste a ton of your own military resources, lives, blood and treasure, right? America went in, it didn't listen to, Putin's talking points. It went in, it lost the war, it suffered $1 trillion worth of, it cost the Americans about $1 trillion, thousands of lives, didn't achieve the goals they wanted. Then, the Arab Spring starts, Gaddafi's, the war in Libya. Again, Russia says, guys, don't bomb Gaddafi because he's holding back the refugees. He's holding back, all these, terrorists and jihadist groups that are going to flood into Europe. What does the Americans and Europeans do? Again, hubris. You don't listen to Putin's talking points because, we know better here in DC. We know better here, at the State Department. What happens? Exactly what the Russians said would happen. You have the migration crises right now, following Syrian and Libyan and the entire Arab Spring. The Ukrainian situation, back in 2013 when the initial Maidan started. Again, nobody really remembers this now, but it's all started because of a economic treaty that Ukraine wanted to sign with the European Union, which was actually very detrimental to Ukraine itself. And again, Russia said, hey, let's sit down. Let's get some negotiators in here. Let's have, Ukrainians, Russians, Europeans negotiate this. And again, that was brushed aside because those were Putin's talking points. And, Putin is obviously a habitual liar, as the New York Times just wrote. And we had the Tucker Carlson interview and things like that. And again, on American TV, you have people always saying, you're just quoting Russian talking points. If Russian talking points are that, the sun rises in the east, that's not Russian talking points, that's facts. And the system trying to fight back, as Yulia said, is doing it horrifically, because at every step that the Western elites are taking nowadays, they're doing to the detriment of that system. And again, there are many reasons for it. Again, like I mentioned, the hubris, just the basic degradation of the political system in the West, the political leaders in the West, because money is made on Wall Street, not in DC. So smart people go there mostly, or to the Silicon Valley. But again, the system fighting back is actually destroying the system even faster, because the system fights back by taking, now they're going to confiscate more Russian assets. So, I mean, the Saudis are going to look at that, the Chinese are going to look at that, the Indians are going to look at that and say, why would we keep our money here if, like I said, that money can be stolen at any point? So the system, by fighting back, is actually destroying itself from within, because of lack of political foresight, because of echo chambers in the West, because once you say that Russia is evil, you have to keep pouring oil into that fire and keep the echo chamber going and keep making villains out of Russians and the Chinese and everybody else. So again, what is going to be the next system? Like again, other people mentioned, we're just at the start of this process. It's going to be a long process. It's going to be a painful process. This might not be the only war to change this. The Ukrainian conflict might not be the only war that will reshuffle the world order. But again, unfortunately, we're at the start of the process, and hopefully the BRICS countries, by advocating for a more fair system where it's not just a hegemon that dominates, but a group of countries, right, that respect each other and that try to create a fair system. Hopefully that will be better, but again, we're just at the beginning, and the system will fight back. But like I said, the system fighting back destroys the system, but also destroys entire countries and millions of lives, unfortunately.
And of course, the quest is for humanity to be safe in the world. Coming to you now, RISHABH, India is part of the BRICS, and we know that the country has been very positive towards the fact that BRICS nations should trade with local currencies, because it will help the internal, the country to fight or control aspects like inflation and other economic challenges that may be detrimental to the economic trajectory of India. So let's look at what the Indian government is doing to ensure that they actually benefit from this process of de-dollarization under the auspices of the BRICS Plus group.
Thank you once again, Ms. Clarice, for your question. From the Indian perspective or Indian point of view, I want to add that India is fully supporting the idea of de-dollarization and also supporting the promotion of the multipolar world, because now we are living in the 21st century, which is the era of digital age, digital era. And now in this present age, no one country can rule the world, or no one currency can rule or control the whole world, because as I said earlier also, that dollar is controlling each and everything globally in terms of global reserve, in terms of petroleum, gas, gold reserve, so many things. And India itself, in terms of IT technology, is one of the growing tech in the world. And India is doing a lot in terms of doing the international trade globally. India is promoting and trying to promote Indian rupees, as already with so many African countries. Recently, you can see from the past year, India is doing so much of international trade between the African countries in the local Indian rupees reserve. And now we are totally against using the international US dollar system or maybe Euro system to make a cooperation between the countries. Every year we are trying to develop the we are trying to promote the local currency exchange system within the country. Even I want to give you a small example, like now the tourists from India are traveling to Russia, and we have a lot of queries in terms of how to do the payment system in Russia, which currency to carry, and we have very strong advice to all the travelers from India to carry the local currency Indian rupees, because you can easily exchange them into Russian rubles here in Russia, or even you can exchange those rubles within India, because now between Russia and India we have a very much active trade, we have very much active trade cooperation and availability of ruble and rupees, and these are such example. And other example I can say that India is already developed a very strong UPI payment system, which is one of the biggest alternative to the SWIFT, because as what the West or the US has done with Russia in this past these years. So maybe it can happen in the future, maybe with India also, because if you see the track record of the West or the US, something which is not of their own interest, they will put sanctions. Even they have already started to put sanction on some of the Indian companies also, and that is why we have already made a parallel payment system between India and Russia, like Vostro accounts, where we are using and doing the payments with our own local currency system. And also I want to add one more point that so to counter SWIFT system, this is also we have one more solution. And then to counter the Visa and MasterCard payment solutions also, we have already developed from the last 4 or 5 years actively Indian rupee card system. And now these card system are already being used in multiple number of Asian countries already. And you know, if you see the history, the global South is the major who had a lot of suffer from these dominance of the US hegemony. And in the last, I want to add one more point, like India is playing a very much active role together with Russia and China in this within the Brics platform, where we are trying to promote much and more multipolar world, because we are trying not only to help ourselves, we are also trying to help the underdeveloped or the developing countries, because we can together change the future of the world.
Let me stay with you, RISHABH. Of course, from what you've highlighted, we know the group of 7 met recently in Italy, and we also noticed that BRICS nations were invited aside Russia. The question is, when the project of the BRICS to ensure the de-dollarization and other aspects in the quest for this new order is actually very obvious. How can the political or geopolitical rhetorics, which some of the experts talking earlier on said this move will actually face stiff competition. So we are looking at how some geopolitical rhetorics are given relations between other countries and who are non-BRICS, and with some BRICS countries can even derail the process by the BRICS alliance in the de-dollarization process.
Dear Clarice, I want to add a very, very simple answer to your question. First of all, recently, yesterday, the G7 summit was concluding in Italy, and already one of our experts has already shared this great answer that if you see those countries in the G7 platform, except Ms. Meloni, the host country of Italy, all the leaders of these G7 countries are already going to be kicked out or will not win the election in the upcoming elections also. And also, when we are talking about comparison, I can say comparison between G7 and BRICS Plus, there is a huge difference and a huge margin, because right now, all those countries who are in the G7, their golden period is totally finished, because all the financial system, all the economy of these G7 countries are going down and down every year. And now BRICS, only if we compare only the 5 old countries, the main countries, their economy is growing much more faster and higher right now in terms of if we compare with the G7 economy. And this is one of the big reason that right now why in the world BRICS is getting much more popular globally, why the countries of the global south, why the countries from Africa or Latin America are standing in the queue, that they all only wanted to be the part of the BRICS Plus. Why? This is the biggest answer, because they can see easily that already the developed countries, their economy is totally disturbed. They are like totally damaged. And in the future, it will be very hard for them to recover the economies. But at the same time, Russia, India, China, they are continuously growing each year by year their economies, despite thousands and thousands of unprecedented sanctions on Russia. But Russia economy is still growing. How and why? Because Russia as a country is not dependent on any other country like in the West. They have their own natural resources. They have their own friendly countries who are supporting them, doing all the strong trade and business between each other. We don't care about sanctions between each other because we know what is the beneficial for our country, what is much more beneficial for the growth of our country economy and for the citizen of our country. And that is why this is a very big role that much more countries are already in queue. More than 50 plus countries have already showcased their interest to be the part of the BRICS summit here in Russia in this year. And I hope by the end of this year's summit in Russia, there will be much more official new countries that will be part of the BRICS. Recently, Thailand has showcased the interest, and also Belarus has showcased the interest, and Russia has fully supported for the Belarus also to be the part of the BRICS. So let's see after this BRICS summit. I hope so that there will be much more new official countries, friendly countries, which would be the part of the BRICS also.
Thank you so much for that, Rishabh. Coming back to you, ELLIS, we are looking at the platform BRICS Plus and also analyzing the scope. Earlier on, you highlighted the many challenges, especially technical challenges that the bloc will face in the process of trying to, change the economic patterns. So what's also continue, because if we are looking at BRICS advocating for a currency that will facilitate trade or cooperation, financial transactions between countries, we want also to look at how the existing financial system or financial architecture will not be, an obstacle to this. In your perspective, what are some of those changes that can be brought to the existing economic bodies in charge of taking very strong economic decisions that impact not just Europe or America, but the global world, and how can the BRICS help to break the chain, something of that sort. ELLIS?
Me or?
Yes, the question is directed to you, dear ELLIS.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm repeating myself, but a thing that few people know, right? Back in the 90s and 2000s, one of the biggest fears in Washington, D.C. was not China or BRICS or anything like that. But it was, an economic alliance between Moscow and Berlin, because the concept was that the Germans with and a colleague from Poland mentioned this, right? That Jacques Chirac, back in 2003, Jacques Chirac, Putin, and Schroeder, who were the three Europeans against the Iraq War, those were European politicians who still cared about Europe. And after that, Europe just became pretty much a vassal of the United States. And that concept of, Germans with their capital and their technologies and Russians with their resources and manpower could be a challenge to the United States, which the Americans successfully destroyed by, we talk about de-dollarization, but at the same time we have de-industrialization of Europe. We have European factories, European businesses leaving the continent because, like it was mentioned, Russia can survive against the sanctions because we have, the natural resources to power the economy, and the Europeans for decades, their economy cheap Russian resources. And since the Nord Streams were blown up or taken offline and things like that. Germany, especially, and Europe in whole, have deindustrialized. And so that threat, the Americans actually handled really well. But that means, again, that one of the main drivers of the world economy, you know, the Germans, the Europeans, are pretty much, you know, taken offline. So again, how will this process come together? How will we, you know, the new system will be built? Like I said, unfortunately, many more lives, potentially millions of lives, will be lost in creating this system. But again, the hope here is that at least, you know, on paper, the BRICS countries declare that they want to build, you know, a fair world, a better world, right? A world where without a hegemony, without the, you know, the vassals and the overlords. So hope, but like also we mentioned, the system will fight back. The system will fight back very stupidly sometimes. But the infrastructure that will be built, that will be put in place, again, is also very much dependent on the Ukrainian conflict and how that will end. We know that there's a conference in Switzerland right now, where a very strange peace conference, right, with one side not being present, that just, I mean, doesn't make sense even to a child probably. But for some reason, we have dozens of countries pretending that that somehow is legit. And we have Vladimir Putin, as Yulia mentioned earlier on Friday, stating Russian, you know, war aims of how to come to the negotiation table. And I mentioned the New York Times article that came out today. Peace terms for Ukraine were much, much better in 2022, right? And again, we need to remember that back in 2021, in December, Putin came out and was called Putin's ultimatum, asking, you know, NATO to finally guarantee Russian security, to stop encroaching on Russian national interests. And like I also mentioned earlier, at every point, the Russians and BRICS in general, they try to, you know, put an olive branch to the West even, like, okay, America, you want to use the dollar? Let's use the dollar, just like don't steal our money. And then, you know, the West goes out and steals money. So what this infrastructure will look like, I don't know, maybe our kids will know. This will take a while, but again, hopefully with the ambitions and the stated goals of the BRICS countries, it will be a more fair infrastructure, a financial system where, again, you don't have vassals, you don't have overlords, you don't have hegemons, and you have, you know, just a system where people benefit from trading goods, commodities, services, and yeah, hopefully that will come together. But again, unfortunately, a lot more blood will be spilled before that happens.
Absolutely. The world is actually watching and carefully the changes which are occurring, particularly at the financial level or the economic level. To you, dear Yulia, we are looking at this move that the BRICS Plus Alliance has taken, and it's very intentional about ensuring a new currency that will facilitate trade, and we are also questioning the role of you know, international multilateral institutions that today control the international economic system. We are talking particularly about the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and other multilateral institutions that actually contribute in setting policies at the international level as far as the economic decision-making actually concerned. So how can we bring these institutions into aligning with the prospects of, you know, or the philosophies of the BRICS Alliance to ensure that we have a more balanced economic world?
Well, I suppose we will see some more practical decisions regarding the possible scenarios of unrolling the new financial system being taken at the BRICS summit in October this year. But before that, I think it's important to yes, to dedicate some time to those international financial organizations. So basically, if you look at their founding documents, like the statute and the key principles that were used to underlie the necessity of their existence itself, there would be nothing wrong about it, right? So the same applies to the UN Security Council, and probably there is no need to reinvent the very same things over again. At the same time, we see that most of those organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, including the World Trade Organization, have been used in order to not just promote, but enforce the political will of a specific group of countries, right? So we could see how, for example, the International Monetary Fund would get deep into politics of the countries that were the recipients of the funding, right? So it means that the funding was given not based on the projects that the country itself would consider essential for its development, but the funding would be used in order to deeply control the political system, deeply control the, let's say, civil society and NGOs and everything else. And this is what is extremely flawed in terms of the existing system of relationships, right? Yeah. So when you look at the funding that would come from the international organizations, you will also find that in many cases, receiving the funding from this kind of organizations would automatically imply, yet not in the formal and public space, acceptance of specific executors. For instance, if you get that kind of money from the International Monetary Fund, a list of the companies that are to implement those projects would arise almost automatically voided. So it's like giving the money with the one hand and taking them back with the other through the corporations responsible for implementation of infrastructural projects and so on. Yet at the same time, the countries that were receiving that kind of funding would be left in debt that would be applied not just for the existing governments, but probably for generations ahead, right? So it takes them deep into dependency. And that's the key problem in terms of distribution and in terms of implementation, let's say, of the funding and related terms, conditions, and requirements. So at the same time, it's necessary to underline that the United States itself, for example, is not a part of the WTO, and that organization was used just to manipulate the rest of the world, let's say, right? The same applies to the International Criminal Court, so the United States is not a part of it, and the ICC regulations cannot be applied to the state itself and its actors, yet they can be applied to a variety of leaders, as it was mentioned in one of the interviews by one of the Western officials, that it was created to serve as a tool against African leaders and Vladimir Putin and everyone else who's not acting in a satisfactory way for the West, let's say. So the problem is not in the organizations themselves or the principles that are supposed to drive them and to define their modus operandi, but the problem is that those rules of the games are not applied to everyone. And basically, this is one of the key, let's say, big issues that the Russian Federation has been fighting against, right? And the one that was made yesterday of Vladimir Putin, they go to highlight the fact that the system of international law or any international system is only good when the same rules are applied for everyone. Once those are used as a tool and there are exceptions, and the country that's dominating doesn't have to follow the very same set of rules and principles that it designed, then we have a problem. Because when you When you have clear rules of the game, just like traffic rules, you have less accidents, you have less conflicts, and you have more civilized solutions, even if something happens.
Yeah.
When you have chaos and anarchy, then you cannot guarantee anything, and the problems would be solved ad hoc, right? So in one case, you would be able to use violence. In other case, you would have to put up with the fact that violence could be used against you. And there is no stable strategic development that you can ensure in this kind of a chaotic context. So basically, what is essential is to have a set of rules and regulations that would be valid for everyone, and that's exactly what the multipolar or polycentric model is all about, to be able to hear everyone, to be able to consider all of the interests, even if they are different or radically different, because otherwise no security and no stability can be guaranteed. And if we don't have security and stability guaranteed, instead of focusing on constructive development, we have to be focusing on our basic needs of the very bottom, on the very bottom of the so-called Maslow pyramid.
Okay. Quite intense. Let me stay with you, Yulia. You quite mentioned the aspect of funding and being aware of some of the stakes across the African continent. Lately, the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akiwumi Adesina, and even the leadership of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto, among those people who have been very vocal about the funding given to African countries and how this is actually derailing the economic trajectory of African countries, given that the resource-backed loans are detrimental to the economic growth of African nations. And recently, during the Italy Africa summit, we saw the Prime Minister of Italy promising, she termed it the Matteo Plan, where African countries will receive guarantees, funding, and even grants. So we want to look at how these other aspects which are coming, and also knowing that African countries are part of the BRICS alliance. How contradictory is this that will maybe limit the scope of the African continent in the de-dollarization process, and also to rewrite a clear economic trajectory for the continent?
What is fundamentally wrong, in my own opinion, in terms of the relations of African countries and Europe and the United States, generally speaking, the West, is that Africans receive money, and in return, they give up their sovereignty, they give up their resources at a super low price, and it does not anyhow contribute to their strategic prosperity and stability. So if you look at the simple stats of how much Africa is getting from the EU, from the USA, from the international financial organizations, and if you look at how much it gives, you will be shocked, because the difference is several times. It's giving several times more than it's getting. And so the constant euphoria related to the fact that new funds were released for Africa and more money will be spent on Africa, it is very misleading, because it does not help to generate own resource base. It doesn't help to regenerate own resource base, meaning that there is no active production developing that could ensure selling products with added value instead of selling raw materials at a super low price. You see that the working and labor conditions in many African countries, especially when you talk about areas like mining or agriculture, are terrible, and that just goes to ensure cheap prices for export, for the resources that are simply being extracted. So who benefits from that funding that is given to the African countries? I can give you a specific example that that our colleague here, Clifton Ellis, could probably elaborate on much more. Yeah. But for example, when you talk about billions that are being released in order to promote and implement alternative energy solutions, on the one hand, it sounds all good because it's good for the environment, because those are renewables and whatsoever else. Yet, this kind of facilities can never guarantee and can never ensure development of production, because production, unlike the households consumption, it requires a lot more of generation, of power generation. Okay. So, giving this, it's like, you know, sharing the crumbles that fall down from the table when a company is eating somewhere, right? Okay. And it means that covering the needs of households or covering the small-scale needs, well, it's good as a matter of fact, but at the same time, it does not contribute to the possibilities of developing own production, and that is the fundamental trap, I would say, because, you know, getting happy and excited about getting some millions or billions for renewables actually disconnects the countries and the communities from the opportunities of being able to own production and to sell goods with added value. Okay. And those are essential things to understand, I assume, in order to understand better why sovereignty is key and why being able to set own, and promote own positions in terms of negotiations and trade deals and economic deals is just key for development. Otherwise, development will be suppressed. It will be happening, of course, in order to satisfy the the communities and the governments and whatsoever else. It will be happening, but at a much slower pace. Okay. If you look at the example of China, in around 20 years, from a country that was quite rural, quite agricultural, didn't have much of own production, it skyrocketed to a completely new level. And it is possible. We see by this example that it is possible when there is no pressure and suppression.
Okay, thank you so much for that great insight, dear Yulia. We're almost culminating. We're coming to you, RISHABH, to take, of course, your last viewpoint pertaining the complexities surrounding the de-dollarization process masterminded by the BRICS in the quest to create a new world order and also a new economic order. So how does the focus on de-dollarization by BRICS reflect, broader trends in global economic governance, and particularly the pursuit of a more balanced international monetary system?
Thank you, dear Clarice. The initiation of de-dollarization together by the BRICS group or by the BRICS countries is now playing a very much important role. And when we are talking about how we can initiate or how we can do it, like for example, already the last year BRICS summit also in Brazil, the idea of starting the BRICS common currency was given by the president of Brazil, and already during this number of events of BRICS here in Russia, it's in the final stage that now it's the right time that the BRICS as a common currency need to be started, which should be utilized for the common trade and economic cooperation between our countries. That can the only way to counter the US dollar, because if this common currency will start in the future, all the people that can be from the perspective of business cooperation, that can be perspective from the students, youth people who are studying in these different countries, or the tourism people, like tourist people who are traveling for the purpose of tourism. So all these such people can utilize a common currency, and they no need to carry those dollars or to exchange in those dollars into the local currency. And second important thing, also to initiate this BRICS currency in the form of digital BRICS currency also. And at the same time, the BRICS banks, which is based in Shanghai, the head office, it plays a very much important role because the BRICS Bank is itself helping the not only the BRICS countries but also the underdeveloped and developing countries from Africa, Latin America, and other Asian countries also in terms of providing the investment loans, credits for the infrastructure development and the growth of their economy also. So this BRICS currency would play a very much important role in terms of de-dollarization. And one of the main reason also, now this US dollar is being utilized globally into the negative terms also, because all these geopolitical situation that is happening, or all the wars are happening around globally in the world, you can see that this US dollar is being utilized in such wars. These dollars are being pumped into these proxy wars globally. You can see there are a lot number of examples, like in situation in Libya, Sudan, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. Now the situation in Ukraine also, the new territories of Russia, which is totally safe under Russia. And just during the G7 summit that concluding yesterday, what the West and the US has done, like the frozen money, the frozen assets of the Russia, in those were in the US dollar, and they have given these credit and loans to the to Ukraine to support this proxy war once again. So that is why now US dollar is now globally used much more into the negative ways, rather than to utilize that money for the positive development of the country or the economy. Yeah. And on the contrary, why we want to promote the BRICS currency, why we want to use the competitor currency against the US dollar, only because we want to promote the multipolar world. This is the main and the common goal and aim of the BRICS Plus platform. And second thing, that we all are now tired of the US dollars, and now we want to get rid of this hegemony and dominancy of the US dollar. And that is why we need a common currency that we can utilize between all the friendly countries, not only the BRICS. I will repeat, because the main aim that we should make our exchange, we should make our cooperation only by using such new currencies, or maybe in the bilateral cooperation to utilize our own currencies, promote our own country's payment system also. Thank you.
Indeed, international cooperation should provide a better scope for the development of individual nations via multilateral agreements or cooperation. We are going to end with you, Alex, with your concluding statements, which I will appreciate if you put it on the implications of the dollarization on for the stability and sustainability of the international financial system.
Well, again, in order to have a stable financial system, like it was already mentioned, you need to have a stable political system, right? When we have wars going on across the world, right? Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the potential for war in Taiwan, building a stable financial system is not that possible on that foundation. And with all this talk of international cooperation and multipolar world, an idea, and this is again what the United Nations Security Council was supposed to be, right? Going back to the concert of Europe of the 19th century, right? The Congress system that allowed for peace to exist for almost 100 years, right? In Europe, where again you had strong powers, you had great powers, you had at times powers that were completely at odds with each other, but yet they would find the balance of how to respect each other and pay attention to each other's interests. And yes, there were minor wars at that time, but for 99 years there was not a global war. And in order to build this world where a stable financial system can exist, a stable political system has to come together. But you need a different, I would say, generation of politicians in the West, because again, like I've mentioned, you have people who are either so full of themselves, right? People who literally thought they brought the end of history by, we in the West won, we beat the commies, now, the end of history. Or you have people like, God forbid, Liz Truss in England, right, who is just a moron, and people like Boris Johnson, who's a clown, but again, who went to Kiev and forbade the Ukrainians to sign a peace treaty that would have saved hundreds of thousands of people. So again, the financial system is important, and it has to also, like Yulia was saying, and others were saying, that there are a lot of smart individuals in the BRICS countries who are obviously working on this and are putting these things together. And the very fact that, the Russian economy didn't collapse back in 2022, when Biden was, gloating about the ruble being, the dollar costing 200 rubles when it was actually like 80 or something like that. You have smart financial people who are building this system, but in order for that system to be put on a foundation that will support it, you need very significant political and geopolitical changes in the world that would, again, bring it to a more multipolar system where you would have, American interests respected, but also Chinese, Russian, Brazilian, Indian, African. Again, we were mentioning that at this point, you have still pretty much the colonial system, especially in French Africa, where you have the the West African franc and the East African franc, where the money of those countries is kept in Paris. I mean, that's colonialism at its best. And you had situations like in Niger, where France was buying uranium for, I think, like 2% of what it actually cost. So the Western system itself has to come to an understanding that they cannot just, walk around the world kicking doors in, that they cannot just dictate to the rest of the world what they want to do, that the history didn't end, and that in order to build a better financial system that will also benefit the West in the end, you need to build a political system that respects all actors in it.
Thank you so much, Lex. It's about having new perspectives and, of course, bringing the rules that will be favorable largely to all, and also to ensure that international cooperation, international relations, it's seen largely a positive, it's a global village. I want to thank you all for your great insight pertaining our topic for discussion this day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for trusting the Pan-African television for you, Media Africa, and to the technicians, we extend our gratitude for ensuring a smooth run of the program. While I leave you in the company of transmissions on For You Media, I wish you a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.